Good morning. Today we have with us Phelan, Director India for World Business Council for Sustainable Development. Joe, thank you very much for joining us today.
My pleasure.
Joe, my first question to you is, what would be the key selected pointers that you would recommend businesses to follow as they frame their sustainability policies?
Okay, well, I think if you've got that role for your company, then your responsibility is to help the company understand and respond to the opportunities and the risks that social environmental challenges present to your business. And I think the way that you would do that is obviously by engaging with peers, with business associations and with civil society to understand better the environment in which you're operating. Equally, to engage with the business leads within your company and understand the priorities and the challenges they face. And then you want to distill that. And when you do that and when you produce your plan, the two important things to always keep hold of are that what you produce needs to be centered on and from the perspective of your business and your company. And you factoring in external factors and outside perspectives, but really from the perspective of your business. And you need to use the language of your company. And ultimately the language of your company, your companies understand financial information, they understand risk information, and really take a management approach. And if you follow those principles, then you will enable your company to be more sustainable itself whilst contributing to a more sustainable society.
WBCSD has been working on UII, Urban Infrastructure Initiative, which calls upon business leaders to work very closely with city leaders. As part of these initiatives, 4 cities in India have been working very closely with WBCSD as well. So what have been the outcomes of this initiative and what is the way forward?
Well, cities are important vehicles for development and they're increasingly significant, increasingly centres of populations. We're seeing all around the world migration to cities. And they present a number of challenges for sustainability, but also huge opportunities for us to have accelerated impact because of the density. So one of our methodologies is to work with cities. That doesn't mean that we don't work to address rural challenges, but one of our methodologies is to work with cities. And the central tenet of the Urban Infrastructure Initiative was that business solutions providers could have much greater impact on the sustainability of a city and the return on investment made by cities if they had an intervention with city planners after the city vision was developed, rather than later down the process where individually companies would tender for specific projects to solve problems that had already been defined. Right. So by working as a group of companies on a non-commercial basis, they were able to get access much earlier in the process with city planners and understand what the city vision was. And from that, bring their problem-solving ability to really address the key challenges and the key priorities identified by the city. And I'll give you an example from the study in Gujarat. And it's interesting, we made, I think, interventions. The plan was 7 cities around the world, 1 in India. When we began working in India, it was suggested to us that perhaps 4 cities would be a better intervention to make in India. I think that's often the Indian approach, but we were happy to do that. So we worked with 4 cities here. But an example would be in the city of Surat. One of the companies involved had previously been asked to provide a solution to traffic management signalling system because of congestion caused by a lot of coal lorries coming into the middle of the city to serve the micro garment industry. By engaging with the city planners right after their vision, they're actually able to understand that the key challenge was power for those textile producers. And so the solution that they could come up with by engaging there was actually about micro renewables and a model that could work in the city centre that meant that the lorries no longer needed to come into the city. So these are the kinds of solutions and enhancements to the city planning and city development process that can come about by having that kind of engagement. When you do that, the unusual things about it are you get a lot of companies who would normally compete to collaborate and to engage in a non-commercial way with a city. and that requires some ground rules and a shared understanding, really, that what you're trying to do is grow the market for more sustainable solutions rather than win some specific business in the short term. So it requires companies to see that there's a medium-term value for them in taking these steps.
How do you see this going forward in India?
Well, we have another intervention with a city that's just beginning, with the city of Indore, where we're working again very closely with a cross-section of city planners and municipal authorities and state authorities, really around enhanced mobility. So we're looking at mobility solutions, much greater access to mobility for the citizens of Indore at a much lower impact in terms of resource use and emissions. And that again is a group of companies who would usually compete, being able to put aside their competitive instincts in the short term so that they can understand the kind of solutions that people in cities like Indore will need going forwards, and so that the city can really accelerate the provision of mobility services to its citizens. In terms of the broader engagement with cities, I think there's going to be a lot happening from WBCSD and our partners with cities in India over the next 2 to 3 years. And there's a summit in Hyderabad, October 7th to 10th, called Metropolis, where some of our members will be explaining with some city mayors what we've done, what we've learned, and where we can go forwards.
Right. Joe, WBCSD has put a lot of focus on climate change. We've been talking a lot about climate change in India as well. How do you think can we provide easy solutions to businesses to tackle this issue? Because really there's quite a lot of gap right now in implementing and tackling these issues on the ground.
Well, easy solutions. So, look, there are a lot of low-hanging fruit, and India is at the front very often in grabbing those. So, a lot of work on energy efficiency, and there are probably even some more innovations, less on the technology side, but more looking at market approaches to enabling energy efficiency, especially in buildings. So great, and that will happen, and we're going to support that. I think that the reality is that the kind of transformation that we need on the climate front is not easy. I think we've got to recognise that, because if it were, it would be happening. What WBCSD is doing is saying, having understood the science and the urgency of the action, and that there is a shortage of leadership from governments, and that shortage is consistent around the world. But the consequences of inaction, that it's becoming more clear every day how serious and urgent action is required. So what the World Business Council for Sustainable Development is doing is we've created a platform called Action 2020, which articulates concrete steps, practical actions that companies can take, deploying business solutions on climate, on emissions, and also on sequestration, sometimes working independently, sometimes very often working collaboratively with other companies. So often some of these solutions are known. What we're doing with our members is committing to these actions, accelerating the solutions that companies deploy, and using that as a leadership approach for companies then to ask governments to bring in the policy support and the financing support that's required. If we wait for those steps to come, it will be too late. So if government won't lead on this, then business must, and companies can lead. So there's a website called www.action2020.org, which has more than 15 or 20 business solutions on climate, which companies can deploy today, and which they can then use to show to government their commitment and their leadership, and make the case for the policy and the enabling environment that all companies require to take these further.
Joe, my last question to you is, in India there are close to 26 million micro, small and medium enterprises, and we really need to move forward very fast on this journey for MSMEs to become sustainable. So what would your recommendations be for MSMEs who are beginning to move forward in this journey?
I mean, I think the key step is to recognize as leaders of any business, large or small, that we have a choice in how we run our companies, and you know, any approach is valid for how you want to run your business, but that there are examples of business leaders recognizing that they don't want to be a separation between how they make their money and grow their business and how they relate to society. And so, I mean, I think the biggest thing that those leading SMEs and MSMEs can do is think about where they fit in the society in which they're operating and how what they do can contribute and enhance the communities in which they live through their core business, through what they do. So not try to make money first and then afterwards think about how we give back, but how we align. And there are lots of examples of that in some well-known Indian companies. I think there's also a role for large businesses in the linkages they have with smaller companies, and a lot of companies are looking at their value chains either because they're required to, or because once they start wanting to really manage and understand the impacts that they're having on environmental and social challenges, and also wanting to build in better security and quality of the products that they're sourcing, then they are looking in their value chains, and there's a lot that can be done through knowledge transfer and support between large companies and small.
Joe, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.